The notice arrived in a crisp, white envelope, so perfect it looked untouched by human hands. It had no postage stamp, only the embossed seal of the Riverstone Creek Homeowners Association. Arthur Sterling, a man who preferred the tactile feel of an old newspaper to the glow of a tablet, almost mistook it for junk mail. He set it on his kitchen counter, a small, pristine square of paper that seemed impossibly out of place next to his worn-out coffee mug and a half-eaten bagel. Arthur was, to put it mildly, an enigma. To the residents of Riverstone Creek, he was simply the quiet man in the two-story house on Maplewood Drive. They knew he worked from home, he was always there, but they couldn't place him. He drove a modest sedan, wore plain polo shirts, and spent his weekends tending to a sprawling, slightly unruly garden. He was a creature of habit, and his biggest rebellion against the neighborhood's meticulous order was a ceramic garden gnome named Barnaby, who sat proudly on his front lawn with a fishing rod. What they didn't know, couldn't possibly fathom, was that the quiet man in the polo shirt was the CEO of Sterling Financial, a multi-billion-dollar banking conglomerate. Arthur Sterling ran an empire from a single laptop in his unassuming home office, a room with a window overlooking his meticulously planned chaos of rose bushes and a slightly toothed hedge. He chose this life of deliberate simplicity, trading the glass towers of downtown for the gentle rhythm of suburban life. He craved anonymity and found peace in the mundane. The immaculate envelope, however, was about to shatter that peace. He finally opened it after his third cup of coffee. The letter inside was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive bureaucracy. It cited him for multiple and repeated infractions of the community's covenants, conditions, and restrictions. CC and R's. The list was a work of art, a testament to someone's obsession with order. Item 1. Unapproved lawn ornamentation 1 garden gnome. Item 2. Violation of landscaping standards, front yard hedge exceeds maximum height of 4 feet. Item 3. Unauthorized exterior modification, non-compliant mailbox. The mailbox, while a standard model, was not one of the 3 approved types listed in the handbook. Item 4. Failure to maintain a pristine aesthetic. Faded welcome mat. The letter concluded with a demand for immediate rectification and a warning that further non-compliance would result in fines. The signature at the bottom belonged to Barbara Hemlock, the newly elected president of the HOA board. Barbara, a woman with a haircut as sharp as her tongue, had made it her personal mission to enforce the HOA's rules with the zeal of a crusader. She was the one who had spotted Barnaby the gnome while on her morning patrol, her eyes scanning for any hint of imperfection. To her, Arthur was a test case, an example she needed to make to ensure the rest of the community fell in line. Arthur, a man who managed a global financial portfolio with a calm detachment that bordered on zen, found himself genuinely perplexed. He had a brief, internal debate. His first instinct was to call his lawyers. A single phone call could bury the HOA in so much legal paperwork they wouldn't know which way was up. But something in him found the situation amusing. It was a novel problem, a conflict of a completely different scale. He decided to handle it himself. He would play their game. He wrote a short, polite email. "Dear Ms. Hemlock," it began. "I have received your letter. I will be happy to discuss the matter with you at your convenience. Regarding the ornamentation, his name is Barnaby. He likes to fish." He hit send, a faint smile on his face. Barbara's response was swift and devoid of any humor. It was a form letter, filled with a new round of threats and a schedule of escalating fines. She didn't respond to his point about Barnaby. She simply added a new line item to his list of sins: passive-aggressive correspondence. The fines began to accumulate. First, a $50 fee for the gnome. Then, $100 for the hedge. Arthur ignored them, choosing instead to trim his hedge by exactly 2 inches. He was a reasonable man. Surely, they would see that. But he had underestimated Barbara's relentless need for control. Barbara began to circulate whispers about him at community events. "He thinks he's above the rules," she'd say to her neighbors, a conspiratorial look in her eye. "Doesn't respond to our letters. Doesn't pay his fines. He's a menace. A threat to our property values." The neighborhood, largely composed of people who valued peace and quiet, had little opinion. But Barbara's constant drumming began to wear them down. Soon, a small group of homeowners, those with the most to lose from even a perceived drop in property value, started to side with her. The next notice from the HOA was a certified letter, which Arthur had to sign for. This time, the language was sharper, more aggressive. Final notice of covenants and conditions violation. It listed all the accumulated fines, now totaling over $1,000, and stated that if he failed to pay within 7 days, his account would be sent to collections. It also warned of further legal action, including potential foreclosure and eviction. Arthur stared at the words foreclosure and eviction. He couldn't help but let out a small, quiet laugh. The absurdity of it was astounding. He, Arthur Sterling, the man who had personally signed off on the mortgage for this entire development, was being threatened with eviction by a woman who fined him for a garden gnome. It was a beautiful, ridiculous irony. He decided it was time to end the game. He sent one last email, this time not to Barbara, but to the entire HOA board. "Gentlemen, Ms. Hemlock," he wrote, "I have received your final notice. I am prepared to meet with you to resolve this matter. I am free this Saturday at 10 a.m. in the community clubhouse." He did not mention the fines or the eviction threat. He simply signed it, respectfully, Arthur Sterling. Barbara, a woman who always saw an opportunity for a public display of power, seized on his email. She assumed he was finally caving, finally ready to beg for mercy. She sent out a mass email to the entire neighborhood, inviting them to attend the official resolution meeting. "Come and witness the board's commitment to protecting our community standards," she wrote. "This will be a decisive moment for the future of Riverstone Creek." On Saturday morning, the community clubhouse was packed. The air was thick with anticipation. Residents sat on folding chairs, whispering to one another, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the man who had dared to defy Barbara. Barbara herself sat at a table in the front, flanked by 2 bewildered-looking board members, a man named Bob who ran a landscaping business, and a retired accountant named Frank. She had a stack of legal documents neatly arranged in front of her. Arthur walked in, looking exactly as he always did, a plain polo shirt, comfortable chinos, a calm expression on his face. He sat down opposite the board. Barbara, puffed up with self-importance, cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "We are here today to address the ongoing violations of Mr. Sterling. The board has been more than patient, but Mr. Sterling has failed to rectify the situation, and now, We have no choice but to proceed with the legal consequences outlined in our CC&R. Mr. Sterling, do you have anything to say before we begin? Arthur simply looked out at the crowd. He recognized a few faces, the young couple who lived across the street, the retired teacher with the poodle, the family with 3 boisterous children. He smiled faintly. "Yes, I do," he said, his voice quiet but carrying through the room. "I have a few questions for the board." Barbara, sensing her moment of triumph, leaned forward. "This is not a negotiation, Mr. Sterling. You've had ample time to comply." "I am not here to negotiate, Ms. Hemlock," Arthur said, his tone still perfectly calm. "I am here to ensure that everyone understands the facts. First, I want to confirm that you have served me with a notice of eviction." "Yes," Barbara said, a triumphant smirk on her face. "As of 3 days ago, for repeated and unaddressed violations of our community standards, and for the failure to pay fines. And you have initiated proceedings to have my property foreclosed upon, correct?" "That is correct," Barbara said, her voice rising. "The total amount of fines, plus legal fees, will be forwarded to your lender. We will begin the process to seize your property if you do not pay in full and rectify the violations within 30 days. "Excellent," Arthur said. The word hung in the air, a bizarre counterpoint to the hostile tone of the room. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single folder. He didn't slam it on the table. He simply laid it down, his movements slow and deliberate. "I believe there has been a slight misunderstanding," he said. He slid a piece of paper from the folder and handed it to Barbara. It was a simple legal document. "This is a copy of my original deed. You'll find my property is, in fact, owned free and clear. No mortgage. So, the threat of foreclosure is, I'm afraid, moot. But that's not the interesting part." Barbara's smirk faltered slightly. The crowd began to murmur. Arthur then took out another document. This one a thick, bound portfolio. "The HOA has a master loan for this entire development, correct?" Bob, the landscaper, spoke up for the first time. "Yes, we took out a loan for the common areas, the park, the clubhouse. That was a big expense. And that loan, from which institution was it taken?" Arthur asked, his eyes fixing on Frank, the retired accountant. Frank, looking uncomfortable, flipped through a few documents on the board's table. It's with Sterling Financial. A subsidiary actually, Sterling Capital." A stunned silence fell over the room. Barbara's face went pale. The name, Sterling, was out there now. The quiet man was not just a homeowner. He was a name they knew. A name on the signs that advertised their bank. "I see you're connecting the dots," Arthur said, his voice still level, without a hint of triumph. "I am the CEO of Sterling Financial. I'm the one who personally approved the loan for this development 3 years ago. I'm the one who signs the checks that pay your legal fees. And I'm the one who, in a professional capacity, can inform you that the legal action you've taken against me, an owner who is not in violation of any actual laws, a gross misuse of your authority, and a direct violation of the original loan covenants." Barbara stared at him, her mouth agape. Her well-practiced arguments, her carefully crafted speech, all of it had turned to dust. The power she wielded was nothing but a flimsy illusion. And the man she had been trying to evict was the architect of her entire world. "Furthermore," Arthur continued, "I will be sending a letter to my legal department to request an immediate review of your community's master loan. It is our policy to call in loans for entities that are mismanaged and engage in frivolous legal action. This is a liability, and we have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders." He wasn't shouting. He wasn't even raising his voice. He was simply stating facts. The kind of facts that could wipe out an entire community. The color drained from Barbara's face. She finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. She hadn't just tried to evict a neighbor. She had tried to evict a giant. And now the giant was waking up. But the fines, Barbara stammered. The rules. "The rules are in place for a reason," Arthur said, cutting her off. "They are meant to protect the community, not to be used as a weapon to bully people over things like gnomes and hedges. Your actions have demonstrated a severe lack of judgment and a blatant disregard for the very spirit of your charter." He looked at the shocked faces in the crowd. "I bought a home here because I wanted to live in a community, not a totalitarian state. I wanted to be a neighbor, not a target." He stood up. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. He picked up his folder, but before he left, he said one more thing. "You have 24 hours to draft a letter of formal apology to me, retract all of the fines and the eviction notice, and issue a public statement to the community. You will also vote for a new HOA president. If you do not, I will personally see to it that your master loan is called in, and that your community's legal assets are frozen." He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked out, leaving a trail of silent, stunned faces. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Barbara. The next day, the HOA board, in a panicked emergency meeting, voted to remove her as president. Bob, the landscaper, took over as interim head. They issued the apology and the public statement, both of which were so formal and so full of legalese that they sounded like a bank's press release. But the message was clear. The HOA had been wrong, and they were retracting everything. Barbara, a woman so used to holding power, was now completely powerless. She was a social pariah, the subject of whispers and side glances. Her reign of petty tyranny was over, and the community she had so desperately tried to control now saw her for what she was, a bully who had flown too close to the sun. Arthur, for his part, went back to his life of quiet simplicity. He received a formal apology from the HOA, which he read and promptly recycled. He didn't gloat. He didn't seek revenge. He had made his point. He had reminded a community that the purpose of their organization was to foster goodwill, not to enforce a rigid, joyless uniformity. A week later, as he was watering his prize-winning roses, a small boy from down the street came up to him. "Mr. Sterling," the boy said, "my mom said you're the president of the bank. Is that true?" Arthur smiled. "I'm the president of a bank," he said. "But more importantly, I'm the president of this garden." He then picked up Barnaby the gnome and placed him back on his perch. "And I'm the protector of this guy. He gets lonely." The boy giggled. Arthur felt a sense of peace settle over him, the kind that came from a job well done. He had defended his right to his little patch of the world, his right to be an individual, and in doing so, he had reminded a community of a fundamental truth. A neighborhood is not a product to be perfected, but a living, breathing thing with its own quirks, its own imperfections, and its own quiet, unwritten stories. He was, and always would be, just Arthur, the quiet man with the garden, the man who was so much more than anyone could have ever imagined. The eviction notice was a long-forgotten piece of paper, a blip in the grand scheme of things, a memory that served as a reminder that even the smallest battles can be fought on the largest of scales, and that a garden gnome, after all, could be the most powerful piece of armor.